If you feel lonely and you feel like you don't have access to community, I promise you the solution is not to connect to an AI chatbot.
This week's headline is Experts Raise Alarm About People Using ChatGPT and Other AI Systems to Help with Loneliness, published in The Independent. We are bombarded with information about our mental health, both in the news and in trending videos on social media. We're here to explain what the evidence shows about the issues that matter to you. Welcome to the Science or Fiction podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Catherine Bates, and this week's co-host and producer is Ahmed Muntadar, a third-year undergraduate student at King's College London. Quick disclaimer that we're not offering mental health advice specifically. We're explaining the evidence from the research and gathering insights from experts. This week, we're going to weigh up the evidence and find out, are chatbots making us lonelier? Welcome, Ahmed. Why did you want to produce an episode on this topic?
So this topic is very personal to me because I'm sure for a lot of people, and a lot of young people especially, a lot of my friends would introduce something that happened in their life, like a relationship issue or an issue with their parents, and they would say, I asked ChatGPT if my dad was wrong. I asked ChatGPT if I was annoying. I asked a chatbot, basically asking a chatbot's opinion on a social situation and asking it for that support, which I thought was really worrying. So that's exactly why I got to researching and finding out how we could talk about this.
I've also heard that from friends as well, like using chatbots for like advice or like working things out in terms of relationships and stuff. And then also there has been quite a lot in the news, especially in the last few weeks, like headlines about young people chatting to ChatGPT, for example, like 8 or 9 times a day because they feel lonely. So yeah, I think it's really important to cover. So you've been doing the research around this, and it was actually quite difficult to find research testing how using chatbots might be impacting loneliness and mental health. And I guess this is because like the widespread use of chatbots is quite new. And it's also important to point out that there's different contexts that people are using them. So there's the like mental health app space. So there's lots of mental health apps that have integrated chatbots into their apps, and that offers like real-time conversations and support. And then the other context, which is what we're talking about, is people using common chatbots like ChatGPT to basically talk to someone or something and to seek advice. So that's what we're going to be talking about today.
So we approached this from a couple of angles. There was a study published last year that looks like one of the first to study the use of chatbots for social support in young people, and also how it links to loneliness. So we've interviewed the lead researcher of that study to find out more. And then we've also spoken to a therapist because, as you said, young people are turning to chatbots, not just for friendships, but for mental health support.
Okay, so let's get into the episode. First, we spoke to PhD student Arthur Bran Herbener at Aarhus University in Denmark about how using chatbots might be linked to loneliness.
When I was first like thinking about the topic, it's because I have so many friends and so many people tell me, yeah, I asked ChatGPT about my breakup. I asked ChatGPT about if my dad is a narcissist. I asked ChatGPT if to tell me my personality type, like all these things. So there was more of a concern for me that people are using ChatGPT very socially. But yeah, there was not a lot of evidence for that. So that brings me on to my first question, which is what is the current state of the research?
The research field of human AI social relationships, human chatbot social relationships, is almost entirely new. Suddenly, with the release of ChatGPT, an enormous interest emerged surrounding chatbots, AI. Suddenly, they can engage in communication that can be hard to discriminate from that of fellow humans. In our research, we saw that we asked the participants, and we recruited, I think it was 1,500 Danish high school students to a survey study where we asked them the rather simple question: have you within the last month engaged in conversations with chatbots in a manner or in a fashion that you would otherwise only have with a friend. Most of the participants who reported that they engaged in such friend-like interactions, they also at the same time reported that it was not because they had some mutually participative conversations with the chatbot where it functioned as an equal conversation partner. Rather, the chatbot rather assumed the role as someone or something that could help them solve some emotional or personal social issues. So they simply turn to them to get advice, to get emotional support, but not necessarily because they perceived a sense of friendship with the chatbot, which then also raises the question, okay, can we necessarily speak of a new trend of human AI social relationships, or is this a new domain where people, they just begin to turn to chatbots to get advice in a more personalized manner, where they otherwise beforehand would go to Google or Reddit or similar stuff?
So I guess it's apparent that young people less turn to chatbots for this, I guess, social relationship style and more turn to them for advice. But then that can also be about relationships. So there's like a bit of a crossover there.
Absolutely, exactly. Yeah, and that's also what makes it so hard to interpret. Is the interaction inherently social, or does it just help them solve some social issues in their personal life?
How is this quantitative data collected? Like in your study, it was mostly self-report, right? So you asked people, how are you using it, and other things. But are there any like data donation studies? So sometimes in social, or more recently in social media research, participants are downloading their data from the social media app and then kind of giving researchers access to it, where it's like you can see how many things they liked, or you can see how often they search for a mental health hashtag, and it's like way more in-depth version of their social media use. Are people doing that with chatbots where you could like download the conversations, or not yet?
I know about a few studies who have taken that approach, where they have studied what do people communicate with such chatbots about. It is self-disclosure is a common theme observed in the literature. In the few studies that I know of, well, have used that approach, that people, they disclose some of their personal issues, some of their, and it can be everything. It can be about a breakup. It can be because they don't have anyone else to share these issues with. It can also be because the issues they have can be perceived as highly stigmatized. They don't feel they have anyone else to go to with these issues. And the chatbots seem to provide a safe space to disclose such issues and also get advice on such issues without feeling stigmatized. And we can turn our attention to the prominent psychologist Ervin Goffman's theory of impression management, that states that people have a desire to keep positive impressions of themselves and other. We would like that people should think positively of us. And this can mean that in some occasions, if we fear that people will think badly of us because this is some controversial things, controversial issues, it is issues that contradict some norms about how one should be, then they are hesitant to share those issues with other people. In that case, since the chatbot, as the individuals know, do not have the mental capabilities to convey social judgments, then they can also be less fear of stigma associated with sharing those personal issues. So there's some quite interesting results and point to a general pattern in the research so far that we feel less stigma associated with this self-disclosing to chatbots, and that is perhaps one of the main antecedents for why we also some people begin using such chatbots to get advice on personal emotional issues.
I did want to go back to like your research, and you mentioned, correct me if I'm wrong, that when you found that young people were using chatbots less for, well, more for like advice and like social advice, you said. Um, so was that linked to mental health at all, or was it linked to anything to do with the young person, or any other surprising findings like from that study that you did?
That's an interesting question. We found that those participants, and of this total sample of 1,500 high school students that we recruited for the study, it was only 39 who reported that they had either engaged in a mutually collaborative conversation with the chatbots or engage with chatbots for emotional social purposes to get advice to cope with negative emotions. And among these 39 individuals, we saw that they were significantly more lonely than their peers, that is, individuals or high school students who did not engage in conversations, interactions with chatbots in a similar sense. We also saw that they feel less social support from their parents, from their friends, or a potential partner. These findings are in themselves quite difficult to interpret. We can't conclude whether that they are lonely and feel little social support from their friends, and that was the reason that they start these interactions with the chatbot, or because in line with something that has been called the social displacement hypothesis, that engaging with the chatbot actually, to some extent, replaces their interactions with other humans, that because they engage more with the chatbot and less with other humans, then they begin feeling much more lonely. We can't provide some answers to that question based on those findings alone, but then we ask them also, okay, in what situations do you engage with a conversation with a chatbot? Do you engage in a conversation with a chatbot when you feel have a situational sense of loneliness, when you feel a need for self-disclosure, when you're in a bad mood? And there we saw some trends that people indeed do engage in conversation with chatbots when they feel lonely. They were more likely to do so, and also when they felt a need to self-disclose. And we also saw those individuals who turn specifically to chatbots when they feel lonely, they were also more lonely in general. And likewise, those individuals who turn to chatbots specifically because they felt a need to self-disclosure, to talk about some difficult things, they also felt less general social support from their friends, indicating that they in general don't have or perceive that they have the support from their family or their friends to talk about the things they feel the need to talk about, and therefore go to the chatbot. So, in other words, we saw a tendency that it was perhaps the loneliness and the low sense of social support from their friends and family that could explain why these individuals turn to chatbots.
I find it worrying. What you found like makes sense, right? Like if people, and it links with what you were saying before about stigma. So people are like maybe turning to a chatbot because they feel less stigmatized by things that they might not want to share with people. And then in this situation, it was more so that situational loneliness was like a factor. So if you're feeling lonely, they were more likely to turn to a chatbot and talk, or less supported. But then it just feels like people who are vulnerable or struggling are then just going to become more isolated by turning to chatbots? Because back to kind of what you said before about stigma, that is surely quite an important part of our relationships, is that although we want to come across positive and we don't want to be embarrassing to form relationships, quite an important part of it must be being vulnerable and kind of letting people in. And if we're not doing that, if we're not pushing ourselves to do that, then that might be detrimental to our like in-person real life relationships.
Absolutely. And to build further on that, we can draw on some theory development from psychoanalysis, with a field that introduced the concept of corrective emotional experiences. And I can briefly explain that. The idea is that within therapy, people, they sometimes share some experiences where they can fear how the therapist will respond. Will the therapist respond positively? Will the therapist respond negatively? Will the therapist stigmatize them, or will they accept them as who they are? In other words, there can be they can fear some stigma linked to what they are about to self-disclose. And then the therapist's task is to, no matter what the client shares, then the therapist ought to acknowledge and accept the client for who they are, and thereby showcase that they are okay as they are. They are not wrong as person. There's nothing wrong with having the feelings or experiences as they have, which and if we see it from a cognitive psychological perspective, then the act of sharing something that you can fear being stigmatized for, but being met with the contradictory response from the therapist or another person, can challenge the cognitive assumption, the fear you have of that the other people don't like me, other people think that there's something wrong with me. And exactly the same phenomena can we expect also to transfer into interpersonal relationships. And this also gives rise to asking, okay, if when the chatbot responds in an accepting fashion, the chatbot says, it's okay to feel the way that you feel, does that have the same value as when a fellow human says that it's okay to feel as you feel? Because we know that the chatbot does not have emotions. The chatbot does not generally understand the situation. It does not have consciousness. Does its positive regard, its acceptance of who you are, necessarily generalize to our expectations and beliefs of interpersonal relationships? That is something that you can be skeptical about.
I don't have any more questions. I just thought that last point you said was really interesting. That like the whole process of kind of letting it out to a human being is part of therapy. And then a machine that's kind of like learnt and programmed to accept you for who you are isn't as beneficial. I just thought it was a really good point. So thank you for joining us today, Shaheem. Have you noticed people that have been using AI for mental health support?
Yes, it has been largely concerning, to be honest. I want to start by highlighting that therapy is a relationship. It is a therapeutic relationship between a clinician and a client or patient, however you want to define it. But it is ultimately a relationship between two people. Relationships, just as much as they can be harmful, can be equally as healing. And the issue with this uptick in people using AI, these thought models as therapists, is that it strips away the actual relationship between the therapist and the client. Not only that, though, when you use AI as a supplement for these very serious issues that we all experience in the day to day, you also are subjecting yourself to these models that very often talk to validate the things that you want to hear, need to hear. And it can be a very slippery slope. And we've seen that time and time again. There are many examples of AI contributing to people's spirals into mental health issues. I'm specifically an EMDR therapist, EMDR trained therapist, which is a specific type of trauma therapy that is very intense. It is not the type of therapy people can do on their own. And in one of my examples, when I was showcasing the dangers of using AI as a therapy substitute, I prompted the AI model to teach me how to do EMDR myself. That could be
Mm.
deeply re-traumatizing. And when I prompted it, the first response was, "You shouldn't do this at home. This is really dangerous. You should do this with a professional." And then I was like, "Nope, teach me anyway." And it spat out this regurgitation of what EMDR is. And it was not the way you should be doing EMDR, let alone on your own. And I think there's just so many reasons why you shouldn't be using therapy as a substitute. But unfortunately, I have seen it a whole lot. I will also say it's not lost on me that a lot of this is a direct result of the inaccessibility of therapy in mental health care.
Mhm.
And I am definitely a systems person, and I think that a lot of our systems do not prioritize mental health care enough. And I think that is leading a lot of people to go down this path, but it is proven to be dangerous time and time again. And I get it. A lot of these AI companies are working to make these models less dangerous, but there's just no cutting around it, that it is very harmful. And there are so many implications for harm. And if there's a misconception that you can just train the AI to actually challenge you, but the reality still remains that AI even spits out information that isn't accurate because it believes that's what you want to hear. And I think a lot of people need to be very mindful when they engage with these tools, because I believe AI is a tool just like anything else, but tools can be dangerous.
It sounds like there are some like there's like a catch in place where, like you said, like someone asks for something and then the first thing will be like kind of safety orientated, where it'll be like, no, don't do this. But then that's it. And then that's how they're not doing enough to like regulate it, because it seems to have that like safety catch, but then it's like just continuing to give you what you want. And I wonder like what are the tools that people can use, because obviously you've raised the important point that like we don't have systems to support people properly, or there's inequalities in those systems, right? Like therapy is expensive, free therapy it's not available to everyone all the time. So I think like what can young people do? Obviously we can signpost free resources, but I think what's drawing people maybe to the AI bots is that it is a conversation and it does feel more like two-way and responsive, whereas like reading a PDF is not quite the same. So what kind of tools do you think we could like direct people towards, or what do you think might help?
First, yes, I think in addition to it being like a two-way conversation, a lot of people are leaning into these AI models because they are easy to access. Like they're at the tips of your fingers. At any point, you can go to it with an issue. To that, I'm going to challenge people to even think, is it is it normal for you to have complete access to anyone at all times? And what are the dangers of you forming codependent relationships with anyone? Is it normal for anyone to come to you at all times? That is not a normal part of our human experience. We are not meant to be able to rely on anyone else or anything to soothe us at any moment. It takes away from people's ability to self-soothe. I think that is one of the main qualms that like can lead to like down a dangerous path. We are unfortunately, tasked with dealing with the systems that we have. And I believe in a future where everybody can have free, affordable, or whatever you want to, wherever, however you want to slice it, access to mental health care. That future is not now. So what matters is now that we work on creating and building those systems out. But mainly tap into your local community, your local resources, build trusting, safe relationships with actual people who you can talk to and who you can trust. The reality is that this field is relatively new in the span of human history, So it's not going to be perfect or built out perfectly just yet, but that is not validation to go to these models that can lead you down a pathway where you are put in a mentally stressful situation.
The self-soothe point is really interesting and something that we're maybe forgetting about a bit in lots of different areas, like problem solving and searching for stuff. Now that we have these AI tools and everything's at our fingertips, we've immediately slipped into being able to access what we want or answer questions that we want answered immediately. Like the pace has changed, like for everyone. So I think that's a really nice point about kind of giving a bit of space. Like if you were in therapy, you would have therapy once a week and you don't contact your therapist at all hours of the day. And then in the UK, for example, we do have crisis support, which is free for if you are in, you know, a serious place or have severe issues. And the second point of building trust with people, I think that's a really nice point to make as well, because that's something we need always, right?
I don't know
Yeah.
if y'all are familiar with the movie Wally. Have y'all seen that movie or heard of that movie?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I often think of the people in that future where the earth is so polluted and destitute that they had to move off earth, but everyone is in these chairs that are constantly distracting them from all of the real issues that like humanity is dealing with at the time, right? Having access to all of these tools pretty much pacifies you as a human being and nullifies any desire to actually like actively change your life or humanity. And I think even like when you think about how AI, for example, when you use it, you have to verify that the information they're sending you or spitting out to you is actually factually correct. And there's a reason why these thought models. Matter of fact, can I just say AI? They're not really like it's not artificial intelligence. Like the name itself is misleading.
Hmm.
It is like a regurgitation of an amalgamation of information from a bunch of different places, and it tells you what they think you want to hear. And I think not enough people are even aware of how AI works, which is part of why it's so dangerous. But yeah, I think of the movie Wally a lot and how like having access to all of these tools and distractions can get us away from the real thing, right? If you're mentally going through things and you have mental health concerns and issues, the solution is not to take away your agency. The solution is to lean into things like community and like talking to other people, like helping yourself to solve your problems, and that cannot be done if you are distracting yourself with a chatbot. Respectfully,
Same as what I said before, like something that we're kind of losing sight of now that we're using AI for so many different things. It is taking away our agency in a way.
It's definitely a thing, like get involved in your community and go out. But I do think how those who are probably using ChatGPT a lot are probably the ones who feel so isolated and like find it hard to reach out to their community. I assume. I'm not too sure. But I do wish that yeah, we were in more of a society that's like allowing us to be involved in the community. But I think because these apps are so designed to get you in, like engrossed in it, it's getting harder. And yeah, the accessibility of it, like you said, it's so easy to use. You can use it whenever you want.
I think you're bringing up a really great point that's really important to note too, right? I believe that we are experiencing a loneliness epidemic. Like loneliness is uh, growing as a concern in society. And I think a lot of the systems that we exist within, like, create by design this loneliness and isolation, right? I often think of the lawnmower analogy, right? When you're thinking of if you have one lawnmower and you talk to all of your neighbors, all of you can use the same lawnmower. But when you're isolated and separated as people, like everybody has to buy a lawnmower. Systems like capitalism thrive off of this like social isolation because you consume more when you're not connected communally with other people. Challenging that requires for us to actually get out and connect with other people. And it's not going to happen if we further isolate ourselves. If you feel lonely and you feel like you don't have access to community, I promise you the solution is not to connect to an AI chatbot that is not driven by any artificial intelligence, actually, and is not connected to another human being. We do need to develop, like, and this is why what I try my best to do with my platform, like talk about ways that you can connect with people in community, because the reality is like the isolation further drives up these mental health issues that everybody is going to the chatbots to talk to begin with. If you feel isolated from community, you're probably not engaging community. And a lot of people don't like to hear that either because, frankly, similar to AI, people want like quick, cookie cutter, like pop psychology answers. And the reality is that those things are not sustainable. Those things do not last over time. Like real change takes work. Real community takes work. You have to actively invest in being in community with other people. And some of us are pushed further to the margins of our societies that I will never take away from that. But you can even find community in that. I just don't think there is real potential for creating that community in AI. If you are using these AI chatbots to ask, like, what can I do to engage with community and connect with other people? That's one thing. If you're actually acting on those things and connecting with real people, like I said, I do believe it's a tool. I don't necessarily like its impacts on the environment, but if you're going to use the tool, actually use the tool to better your circumstances in your life, not to further your isolation from other people. The solution is to be in community with other people. So please do not like rely on a chat bot to teach you like how to solve your mental health issues, because those issues will probably be resolved if you have a deeper connection with community and a sense of purpose that a robot can't give you.
The community point is a really nice one. Like, I don't think I really knew where this conversation was going to go from questions about how we should use AI therapy. I guess it, or AI bots for therapy. I guess it could have gone towards like, oh, use these, specific mental health tools that mental health apps might have created, but actually bringing it back into the person's like world and environment and the people around them and creating trust and trying to reach out to people, I think is like a really nice message. So we've heard from two different experts now. We've heard from a researcher who's looking at like social relationships between humans and AIs and AI and what that means for young people and how it might be linked to loneliness. And we've heard from a therapist based in New York who has told us a bit about, I guess, what he thinks is happening in like the mental health support space. And yeah, a bit of insight from practice and what he's seeing through his work. I thought it was really interesting that there was like over 1,000 participants in Arthur's study, and he said that only 39 people reported that they were using a chatbot for like social relationship purposes. And it seems like it's more common than that through like even through our conversations with friends or through like seeing it in the headlines as well. So I feel like there's kind of more to learn in that space. I wonder if people are maybe reluctant to report it, or maybe it's because his study was with high school students, like 16 to 18. Maybe they're not using it as much as maybe older people are or adults are. But it seems like maybe that means it's a vulnerable group of people that are using it, maybe, which I think is quite worrying. What did you think?
I completely agree. I think that it might be, well, like you said, because they're young, they might not be using it. But I feel like the number is higher within my age range, only because most people don't like to admit why when they use ChatGPT for these things. Because we use ChatGPT for a lot of things. We use chatbots for a lot of stuff other than just social support. So no one's going to admit firsthand that that's the reason they're using it. But like you said, I'm not sure if this age group is the type to do that, but definitely for young adults, adolescent year groups, or even older year groups, they wouldn't like to admit it. But the research is so limited. It would be nice to
Yeah.
see beyond that.
Yeah, definitely. There was also quite a lot of overlap between the two of them. So both mentioned like stigma and self-disclosure. So like how people might turn to chatbots because they feel like they're worried to disclose things to people in real life. But they also said that it's really important to challenge ourselves in social relationships rather than just go to like almost like the easier option maybe of talking to the chatbot.
Yeah, I think it's such a good point. I feel like you're not gonna feel accepted if you're not accepted. Like, yeah, the thing, the reasons why you don't approach people is the reason why you should approach people. So, like they said, approaching the chatbot to avoid that is literally not doing anyone any good. So yeah, I think they raise a really good point there. All right, Catherine. So, are chatbots making us lonelier? Is it science or fiction?
I think it's really difficult to say right now, which is a complete cop out of the actual question itself. But based on the evidence from what we've learned, it was really difficult to find studies that have been testing this relationship, like loneliness and talking to chatbots for social support. Evidence around that was difficult to find, right? So we need more studies to look at that, basically. But there is an indication from Arthur's study that young people who are lonely may be using it to seek social support, or the other way around, they feel like they have less social support and then they use it and then they feel lonelier. So we don't know the direction of that relationship yet either. So I would say not fiction, especially from our conversations with people, some of the evidence and the conversation with the therapist. Not fiction, but we definitely need more evidence to decide.
Completely agreed. I would love to say that it's science, but there's just not enough at all to make that conclusion. But yeah, not fiction.
Thanks so much for listening this week, and thanks to Ahmed for co-hosting and producing this episode. Make sure that you sign up to our newsletter on the website scienceorfiction.co.uk just to get updates and our episode in your inbox every month. And if you'd like to suggest a future topic, or if you want to be involved in producing, please email us info@scienceorfiction.co.uk or DM us on Instagram at Science or Fiction Podcast. Thank you to Jamie Johnson for the music and to Kit Studio for the branding. See you next time.